Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's my pleasure to rise and support the findings of the recommendation of the House of Representatives Standing Committee on the Environment and Energy report titled Powering Our Future, and inquiring into modernising Australia's electricity grid. For most of 2017, the committee looked at Australia's electricity grid centred on the eastern states. In line with the terms of reference, the committee gave particular consideration to the means by which a modern electricity transmission and distribution network can be expected to ensure a secure and sustainable supply of electricity at the lowest possible cost. Current and future technological, economic and regulatory opportunities to achieve a modern grid, and the experiences of international jurisdictions and how they can be used to inform planning in Australia. We were looking to provide recommendations that will serve the consumers of energy well into the future and address issues of ageing fleet, new technologies and price pressures. The committee was particularly aware that it was important to find a consensus position, and I thank my colleagues on the committee for their willingness to embrace this position, despite there being a large divergence of views about how electricity should be generated and supplied. I especially acknowledge the members for Mallee and the member for Shortland as the Chair and Deputy Chair for their leadership and assistance during the committee hearings and deliberations to ensure the effectiveness and usefulness of the report. And I also acknowledge the member for Petrie in the Chair and the member for Brisbane as part of the committee who was part of this consensus and worked very hard to get there. I also recognise the work of the committee secretariat, Penny Deanne, Emma Matthews and Ashley Stevens for their professionalism, knowledge and support that kept the committee focused and prepared to speak to well over 60 experts in public hearings. The committee was pleased to accept contributions of over 58 written submissions, as well as more than 2,500 online submissions. Interestingly, it was clear from the work the committee did both in Australia and the experiences in the several markets we visited in Germany and the United States that a well-functioning grid needs policy certainty. Policy certainty will address pricing and supply. This requires all parts of the political spectrum to come together to ensure that there is agreement on policy direction. The committee heard evidence that the inability of this place to provide certainty in energy policy over the last 10 years has placed the equivalent of a $50 a tonne carbon price on electricity generation. Why is certainty required? Certainty will provide the stimulus for investments in both plant and innovation to supply Australian businesses and consumers with affordable, accessible power. It is clear that this place needs to lead and provide that certainty, and I encourage all of us to do that as soon as possible. Australia has always been in the forefront of embracing new technologies, from mobile phones, computers, televisions, and electricity is no exception. The take-up of alternate generation sources, such as rooftop solar, has risen exponentially in the last decade. Some of this growth was increased by subsidies from previous federal and state governments, but the growth has continued after subsidies have disappeared. It seems there are many reasons for this continued trend, bill reduction always being a primary concern, along with a wish to provide cleaner energy and a lower carbon footprint. These are other determining factors. The amount of generation behind the meter needs to be assessed, modelled and then incorporated into planning for the grid and for future production to ensure stability. Further, we heard that innovation of behind-the-meter generation can negate the need to build as much extra power generation. It is important when decisions are made about how power is generated, that consideration is given to ensuring that there is equity in this system and consumers, particularly those on low incomes or renters, are not left to shoulder grid costs as those more able to afford rooftop solar and other options leave the grid. For the Australian public and industry, the most important function of an electricity grid is to provide dependable power when they need it, and this report and its recommendations can provide the basis of a proper and robust energy future with secure, reliable, affordable and lower emission grid for Australia. I commend the report to the House.